What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why the market's attempting to rebound right now and whether or not this move is going to last, in my opinion, and how I think things are going to progress as we just got some data. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY in uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon, just about 12 days from now. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. So SPY is trying to gap up right here. It's going to likely do that and try to test some resistance. And we'll have to watch and see if we can break this resistance right here to try to push a little bit higher. But even if we do push a bit higher, the question is, will we make a lower high compared to the all-time highs? And if we do that, will we pivot and eventually start dumping, especially as we have this gap to fill on the daily time frame? So I'll talk about that in just a minute. Just know this, Jerome Powell was talking about how the Fed is going to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to their rate cut cycle because of the fact that we are seeing inflation increasing a bit for all items in terms of PCE and CPI. So the market didn't like that, right? The projections show there's going to be less cuts projected for the next 1, 2, and 3 years than initially anticipated. And the market was not happy. That's why the market saw this massive sell-off. And, the sell-off had a very, very big effect on the markets in a way where there's a lot of momentum that could still be remaining. And that's why you want to be very careful with the way things are moving. That's just the effect of Jerome Powell, how he affects things. For other pieces of news, I'm not seeing anything else that's like too crazy, at least so far. I do want to mention that, as we approach the end of the week, there could be a possible government shutdown unless funding is once again extended. So we'll watch and see what happens from Congress as time goes on. So please keep that in mind. That could be another factor affecting the market to some extent. But besides that, we had some data that came out today. Today is Thursday, December 19th, 2024. The GDP numbers were quite decent. So the GDP growth rate was at 3.1%, above expectations of 2.8%. The price index was at 1.9%, aligned with expectations. And then we have initial jobless claims right over here, which was at 220,000. This is once again below expectations, which is not bad. And then everything else was quite decent in terms of our data, especially if you look at like GDP sales. So the data was decent. The market is trying to rebound off of this to some extent. However, at 11:30 a.m., there's going to be some bill auctions, and there's not anything else that's too crazy coming out for the rest of the day. But like I said before, we'll have to see if the move lasts. Now, later on today, we have Nike and FedEx and BlackBerry announcing earnings. So we'll see what that leads to. And then we'll talk about what's going on right over here. So looking at the markets, we have this big gap to fill down here on SPY, all the way down to about 576 a share. I want to pay very close attention to that just to be safe, because there's a possibility we do eventually get back down there. Now, for now, we're not ready to go down there. The market's trying to rebound after this big red day yesterday. So we're testing this resistance at the daily 50 EMA around 590.8 to 591. That's going to be a tough resistance. If we could break that, there might be an attempt to get to 595. We'll have to see if we break this though. And then even if we do attempt to break out a little bit higher towards 595, it's possible that the move doesn't last, however, because like I said before, you want to see it get above these EMAs. You want to see it reclaim the 600s to turn back up. And it's looking very, very difficult, especially after this big red bar and high volume selling. So I'm thinking that what could happen is we attempt to rebound. We get to about 591. Maybe if we break that, we could get closer to 595. And then if we can't sustain these levels, we could pivot and start to slowly turn back down. There's going to be a risk of that potentially happening because we're at some tough resistance at 591 and then 595. And then, with the big red bar and a potential pivot coming on the daily, this makes you suspect that there could be a trend change, right? We were talking about the trend change yesterday. So this could be a sign that the market's about to make a lower high before it starts to dip. And it could be filling some gaps below. There's a strong possibility of that. Yes, it's going to try to rebound. We're looking for an attempt to get back up to about 6,000. I think we might attempt to get close to that. We'll have to see if we can hold above 6,000, eventually 6,020. But if we can't get back up to 6,000 or if we fall short, there's going to be a risk of us getting a rejection and dumping back down to the low 5,900 area. So please be very careful with this. So look for a rebound attempt close to 6,000. We'll see if we get some kind of rejection to start dipping. So please be very careful, guys. I'm just here to give you guys a warning about that. As far as Nvidia goes, I am concerned about the fact that we have a left shoulder head and a right shoulder forming, and there's a slight downtrend right here. So it could attempt to get close to about the 133 area. I could see it getting close to that, if not 136. But then, like I said before, the trend is bearish. We're making lower highs right here on Nvidia. We're rejecting off head and shoulders, and we have a bunch of gaps to fill in the daily. It could rebound for 133 or so, and then eventually start dipping back down to the lows. And if we lose the lows, there's going to be a risk of us filling these gaps. So I think that's a very strong possibility. A test of 133 to 136, then a rejection possibly. Bitcoin's trying to rebound for 104,000, which I think we could get close to, but then there's going to be a risk of us turning back down to about 99,900. If that fails us, we could be dipping to about 96,900. So please be careful with it. Tesla's going to attempt to rebound for 450. I did call it out yesterday. If that breaks, we're now looking for 458 to 460 on Tesla's our potential targets. We'll see if Tesla could get bought back up there. But here's one concern about Tesla. When you look at the 4-hour time frame, there's a gap to fill below right now. So there's going to be a risk of it coming down again. So I think we might attempt a rebound to get close to 460. I'm really hoping we do that. But the resistance is going to be tough up there. And after this big red bar, it could just be a temporary push before it starts dipping. Remember, Tesla is very sensitive to interest rates. So if the Fed is not cutting as fast as initially expected, this could hurt their sales, at least to some extent. The same thing can be said about pretty much any, auto manufacturer in the US. So in this case, we could attempt to rebound temporarily, but there could be a risk of us turning back down to fill this gap towards 440 and then eventually dipping to the lows from yesterday all over again. There's a big red bar and we're turning on the PPO with high volume selling. So look for an attempt to get close to 460. If we can't hold that, we could be dipping back down to fill that gap. There's a strong possibility of that. The NQ chart looks a little bit more bullish, it's trying to rebound a bit, but we'll have to see if we can get back above 21,700. Will we end up projecting or not? 21,700 at the 20 EMA is our resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 21,800. I could be looking for an attempt to push into that range, but if we can't hold above 21,700 on the daily, then this could reject and turn back down to 21,269. So keep that in mind. We got to get back above 21,700. Otherwise, there's a risk of us coming back down to our 50 EMA down here. For the QQQ, we're trying to hold above 520. As long as we hold that, we could attempt for 525 or above. We need to try to get back up towards these highs to rebound. We could hit 525 as long as 520 holds and 521 breaks. So look for an attempt to get to 521 and 525. And if we reject there, we could be dipping right back down. I do want to mention that there's a gap to fill around 509 and then 508. But just be a little bit careful. The daily does look weaker. There might be a rebound attempt, and watch and see where we end up topping and if we do get some kind of pivot. So watch and see if we could break 521 and then 525. There might be an attempt to push higher. But if we make a lower high around that range, if we don't hold above 525, for example, there could be a risk of us turning back down to the low of the day from yesterday, eventually filling this gap here. So please be careful. Apple is trying to dip right here. We're going to be watching to see how well we hold above 248. We could rebound a bit, but then there's a risk of us dipping towards 245 and eventually these lower levels. So please be very careful with that. For the IWM Russell 2000, we are also on a bit of a downtrend here. We could attempt to rebound for 225. If that breaks, we're looking for 227. But then watch and see if we get some kind of rejection, especially at 226.5 to 227. It's going to be a tough resistance. So I could see a 225 to 226.5 to 227 range of resistance before we turn back down. We might reject very close to the higher 220s. And then if that happens, we could be retesting the lows of the day all over again. For coin, we're kind of rejecting. We have this gap to fill down here around 270. There's also a big gap down here. We could rebound for essentially 295 to about 302. That's where coin could be pushing towards. And then if we reject near 302, we could be turning back down to basically to the 280 area, not to mention 272. So look for a rebound and rejections, the most likely cases, and we'll see how things end up going. We could attempt to rebound for 225 to about 227 on Amazon. So look for a rebound attempt. And then we could be turning from there, going back down towards 219 if that ends up failing. If 219 fails us, we're looking for a dip to about 216 and eventually 212 to fill that gap below. So watch this gap down here. If we rebound a bit, which is great, we could be trying to retest 225. So look for a push, but then watch and see if we get a rejection of 225 or not. We could attempt to push. We'll have to see how it reacts. And if we turn near 225 or so, then this could start to pivot back down to the lows. If we lose 219, we will turn a lot more bearish. So just be careful on Amazon. Meta's trying to rebound for 610, and then eventually like 617 comes next. So look for a push to the mid 610s, and if we turn, this could start to dip back down to 604, then eventually lower levels such as 600 flats, then the lows from yesterday and beyond. So be careful. We do have gaps to fill on Meta as well, but look for a rebound to start things off. Microsoft could be going for 444 if that rejects. We're looking for a move back down to 438. And then Google, same thing. We're looking for essentially 494. If that breaks, we could push a little bit higher, but then watch and see if we pivot and we make a lower high compared to this high. There's a huge gap to fill on Google. If we end up losing support from the low yesterday at 189, we could be dipping to this imbalance at 186 and then 184. And if that fails us, we have a gap to fill. So be careful. There's going to be a risk of the market pushing and rejecting. So look for a rebound in the markets. After the GDP numbers came out, the market's trying to push. I do expect us to attempt to push higher. But then the issue is there's no guarantee the move is going to last. So please be very mindful of that. And things could turn, as time goes on. Thank you for listening. I'll be back in a couple of hours for another update, and peace out.